Gather round. It's time for another tale as old as time. That all depends on who started keeping track of time. For it's nearing the end of the year. New Year's Eve draws ever so close. They say that in the ancient Viking world, Norse mythology, that when you would make your New Year's resolution, if you would not complete your New Year's resolution and follow through with your New Year's resolution, you would be killed the next year. Well, half of America would be dead by now, and for good reason. For those unaware, the lecture has begun, so if you pupils shall be quiet. It's okay. Please take all conversations outdoors. Class is in session. And of course, the ones talking have no class. And that includes me, because I'm talking. Well, it seems that another president has died today. Brother Jimmy Carter, a puny farmer no less, governor of Georgia, yes sir, Georgian peanut farmer died. Boy, I would have hated to be a hostage during his presidency. I'd also would have hated to be a union worker. Not a very good guy when it came to unions. Him and his wife were very good with mental health care, though, which is something that lacks in this country, thanks to Reagan. Sure, we're all big fans of Reagan. I see a couple of you flannel-wearing folks probably love Reagan. Reagan, one of the most important people to punk rock. Him and Margaret Thatcher and the Queen. There's an original statement. Anyway, Jimmy Carter recently passed away within hours ago. Actually, when Brian, who will be walking upstage right now, when he rang a bell in Cleveland, he rang a bell and Jimmy Carter died. That's factual. In certain realities, anything is factual. And this is the very bell, folks. This is the very bell. Anywho, an interesting thing happened during Jimmy Carter's presidency, and that was a contribution from one of your very members of your community, Jim Jones. Ladies and gentlemen, Jim Jones, the CIA operative, Jim Jones, got his credentials here in the great city of Indianapolis. You can go see the house today. It's a nice dark green home. At least it was last time I was here. If we turn back time and take out your textbooks, which I'm sure you brought, we'll go to the Jonestown Massacre, drinking of the purple Kool-Aid. But it's not what those documentaries tell you on the History Channel. Oh no. Research has shown that the story quickly changed after the happening. After the closure of the MK Ultra project, it was said brainwashing and manipulation had been over in these United States, but it just moved offshore, just like drilling. And there's nothing wrong with a little offshore drilling. That's what John Perry Barlow said. There's nothing wrong with a little offshore drilling. Of course, he was talking about cheating on his wife then, though. Yes, the People's Temple of Guyana was a test, a covert off-the-island test California decides to go and visit Guyana, the People's Temple, a communist people, a socialist people, and finds the truth. Later shot and killed on the tarmac. The congressman has been shot. The congressman has been shot. Oh, but have we reached out to Russia? It's too late. It's too late. Oh, if you're ready to go, I'm ready to go. People have died for this. There's been a case where people have tried to sue the American government and sue the CIA for the death of 900 people, 700 of which actually have shown signs during autopsy that they were not, however, killed by drinking the Kool-Aid, but murdered in cold blood. Many of them children injected. Yes, that documentary you watched in 97 or last night on Netflix or whatever you folks watch nowadays was a lie. It's all tied in. Just read Program to Kill. These aren't original ideas. What's original? the valleys of the USA. Thank you for your time. We're Acid 87. We're on tour. We got propaganda over there. Thanks to all the bands and the masses for coming out. Can't do it without these guys.
Case that refuses to be closed. Not like the assassinations of John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert, the murder of Martin Luther King Jr. is a case that refuses to be closed. 9 years later, a special committee of Congress is investigating the crime. The attorney, like the assassination of John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert, the murder of Martin Luther King Jr. is a case that refuses to be closed.
From St. Louis,
9 years later, a special committee of Congress is investigating the crime.
Asbury Park, New Jersey, and Huntington Beach, California.
Talk to the man who sits in prison as the assassin. Is a case that refuses to be closed. 9 years later, a special committee of Congress is investigating the crime. The Attorney General of the United States has publicly said he wants to talk to the man who sits in prison as the assassin. It was on April 4th, 1968 that Dr. King was shot in Memphis, Tennessee. In June, James Earl Ray was arrested in England. Like the assassinations of John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert, the murder of Martin Luther King Jr. is a case that refuses to be closed. Not like the assassinations of John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert, the murder of Martin Luther King Jr. is a case that refuses to be closed. 9 years
Memphis,
later,
Hotel 2 Kings.
investigating the crime. The attorney, like the assassinations of John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert, the murder of Martin Luther King Jr.
Right around the season in which we are at this very moment.
Special committee of Congress is investigating the crime.
The Lord misrule, the killing of the king, and ancient ritual done in different parts of Europe for thousands of
9
years.
years later, a special committee of Congress is investigating the crime.
The idea of the crops not growing too well was put upon the kings and coaches.
It was on April 4th, 1968 that Dr. King was shot in Memphis, Tennessee. In June,
Some of those European kings got a better idea.
like the assassinations of John F. Kennedy and his
Based
brother
on
Robert,
the ideas
murder
of
of Martin Luther King
Saturnalia.
Jr. is a case that
You
refuses
look
to
at
be
it when you get home, I don't have time to explain.
Like the assassinations of John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert,
They decided
murder of
to
Martin Luther
reverse
King Jr.
roles.
is a case that refuses to be
Find a
closed.
fool
9 years later,
who could act as a king for 12 days.
the attorney,
Or what we would know
like the
as
assassinations of
the
John F. Kennedy
12
and his
days of
brother Robert,
Christmas.
the murder of Martin Luther King Jr.
Also,
is a case that refuses
the
to be
12
closed.
darkest days of the
9
year.
years later, a
In
special
which
committee of Congress is investigating the
tonight
crime.
is the last
The
night
Attorney
of.
General of the United
No,
States
actually,
has publicly
it's
said
Sunday.
he wants to talk to the man who
Sometimes
sits in prison as the
I
assassin.
think I don't.
Is a case that refuses to be
Tomorrow
closed.
is the last day.
9 years later, a special committee of Congress is investigating the crime.
January
The
6th,
Attorney
the
General of the United
Epiphany.
States has publicly said he wants to talk to the man who sits in prison as the assassin.
The day
It
of
was
new
on
life
April 4th,
and
1968
emergence.
that Dr. King was shot in Memphis, Tennessee.
When the fool
In
king
June,
would
James Earl Ray
go about town, making merry, getting drunk, and having
John F. Kennedy
fun,
and his brother Robert,
they knew that at the end of the 12 days,
refuses to be
they
closed.
would be sacrificed
Like the assassinations of John F. Kennedy and his
in
brother Robert,
order for
the murder of
their
Martin Luther King
Harriet to
Jr.
have
is a
a
case that
good
refuses to be
harvest.
closed. 9 years later, a special committee of Congress
Some
is
people
investigating
believe
the crime.
that John F. Kennedy
Like the assassination
was
of
the
John F.
king
Kennedy
for
and his
that
brother Robert,
ritual here
the
in
murder of
America.
Martin Luther King Jr.
But here in
refuses to be
Memphis,
closed.
a
9
city
years
named
later,
after an
a special
Egyptian
committee
city
of
or
Congress
Greek
is
city or
investigating the
something,
crime.
I don't know,
The Attorney General of the United States has publicly said he wants to talk to the man who sits in
There are
prison
two
as the
kings.
assassin. Is a case that refuses to be
I'm
closed.
sorry to tell you, Jerry
9
Lewis,
years later,
you're not
a
one of
special
them.
committee of Congress is investigating the crime. The Attorney General of the United States has
One
publicly said
Elvis
he wants to
Presley.
talk to the man who sits in prison as the assassin. It was on April
For a
4th,
few measly
1968,
dollars or 30 or 60 or something like that, you
In
can go
June,
see his
James
grave.
Earl Ray was arrested in
But
England.
my aunt says the blue suede
Like the
suit isn't
assassination of
there.
John F. Kennedy and his brother
Really
Robert,
embarrassed me at
the murder of
15
Martin
when she
Luther
kept
King
asking
Jr.
the
is
tour
a case that
guide.
refuses to be closed.
I don't care. It's funny now.
Like the assassinations of John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert, the murder of Martin Luther King Jr. is a case that refuses to
And
be
then, of
closed.
course, there's
9
Martin
years
Luther
later,
King.
a special committee of Congress is investigating the crime.
A man of means Personally, I'm more of a Malcolm X fan, but
Murder of Martin Luther King Jr. is a case that refuses
and
to
is
be
remembered for good reason.
9 years later, a special
We're
committee
causing
of Congress
social change in our society.
the Attorney General of the United States
Hopefully we all believe in.
he
If
wants to
not,
talk to the man
there's the door.
who as the assassin. It's a case
Let
that
it hit
refuses
you
to
on
be
your way
closed.
out.
9 years later, a special committee of Congress is investigating the crime. The Attorney General of the United States has publicly said he wants to talk to the man who sits in prison as the assassin.
James Earl Ray. Not James Earl Jones. That's the Darth Vader.
In June, James Earl Ray,
James Earl Ray, the man who was said to have shot Martin
Kennedy
Luther
and his brother
King,
Robert,
most likely did not. It's a wrong place, wrong time scenario.
like the
We
assassination
all
of
know
John
this
F.
by
Kennedy and his
now.
brother Robert,
If you don't,
murder
where
of
have you
Martin
been?
Luther King Jr. is a case that refuses to be closed.
James Earl Ray, a St. Louisman, in fact, East St. Louis.
The attorney, like the
Troubled
assassination of John F.
person.
Kennedy and his brother Robert,
Caught off the side street of Cherokee, a very popular street nowadays for the good artists of St. Louis. Yes, he was robbing a convenience store on Cherokee Street, at the corner of Cherokee and
is a
Ohio.
case that refuses to be closed. 9 years later, a special committee of Congress is investigating the crime.
He was put into the penitentiary of
He wants to talk to the man.
Missouri, Jefferson City, the Missouri penitentiary, and he was able to break out.
King was shot in Memphis, Tennessee.
He measured his distance from candy bars. You can read the article in Life magazine from 1960
Kennedy and his brother Robert.
The trust memory and remember everything that he saw, drawing it with the accurate.
Like the assassination of John F. Kennedy and his
The
brother
distance
Robert.
in time from candy bars at the
King
store,
Jr. is a case that
learning how to
refuses
gain
to be closed.
currency, capital,
9 years
and
later,
get an
a special
IT.
committee of Congress is investigating.
All at the prison library. Of course, you know, if
Like
you
the
go to prison,
assassination of John F. Kennedy
you're
and his
going to
brother
learn
Robert.
something.
The murder of Martin Luther King Jr. is a case that refuses to be closed.
Making his way to Canada, he decided he would try to learn to speak Spanish so he could go down to Mexico and get paid for construction services. While there, he took a liking to making some pornographic films, check it out, it's true. And he decided to buy a luxury supercar to find himself a fancy little wife.
It was on April 4th, 1968, that Dr. King was shot.
The article I read named her as being homeless.
James Earl Ray was arrested in England.
That's all.
Like the assassination of John F. Kennedy and his brother
He
Robert.
was distraught when he wanted to take a dancing lesson, but he wanted to only learn the salsa, so he thought they were making fitting in Mexico. But that was the second dancing class.
9 years later, a special committee of Congress investigating the crime. The attorney
Later,
like the
here in
assassination of
Memphis.
John F. Kennedy and his brother
A whole
Robert.
lot of stuff. You know, he was on the run for 2
Jr. is
years.
a case that refuses to be
Trying
closed.
to learn Spanish.
9 years later, a special committee of Congress is investigating the crime.
Good
The
stuff.
Attorney General of the United States has publicly said he wants to talk to the man who sits in prison as the assassin. It's a case that refuses to be closed. 9 years later,
Why not?
a special committee of
I
Congress
believe
is
someone
investigating
wrote
the
it.
crime. The Attorney General of the United States has publicly said he wants to talk to the
There's
man who
always
sits in
one
prison as the
face
assassin.
reality. We all make our own
April 4th,
reality.
1968,
We're all living the
King
same
was shot in Memphis, Tennessee.
Yes, we happened to be in Memphis, blah, blah, blah. But he was getting his car checked or
John F.
something.
Kennedy and his brother Robert. The
Thing.
murder of Martin Luther King
This
Jr.
is a fellow
is
who
a
was
case
on
that
the run for
refuses to be
3 years. He happened to be here and they called him in like England or something. Pretty bizarre.
Martin Luther King Jr. is a case that
They
refuses to
painted
be
it on
closed.
him.
9 years later, a special committee of Congress is investigating the crime.
In 2025, we also have understanding that all the great people killed were killed by our very own government. The CIA, FBI.
A special committee of Congress is
If you don't
investigating the
think
crime.
that, I'm
The
sorry.
Attorney General of the United States has publicly said
He
he wants to
moved
talk
away.
to in prison as the assassin. He's a case that refuses to be closed. 9 years later, a special committee of Congress is investigating the crime. The Attorney
It's good.
is a case that refuses to be closed. 9 years later, a special committee of Congress is investigating the crime. The Attorney General of the United States has publicly said he wants to talk to the man who sits in prison as the assassin. It was on April 4th, 1968, that Dr. King was shot in Memphis, Tennessee. In June, James O'Leary was arrested in England. Like the assassinations of John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert, the murder of Martin Luther King Jr. is a case that refuses to be closed. Like the assassinations of John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert, the murder of Martin Luther King Jr. is a case that refuses to be closed. 9 years later, a special committee of Congress is investigating the crime. The Attorney General. Like the assassinations of John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert, the murder of Martin Luther King Jr. is a case that refuses to be closed. 9 years later, a special committee of Congress is investigating the crime. The Attorney General of the United States has publicly said he wants to talk to the man who sits in prison as the assassin. Is a case that refuses to be closed. 9 years later, a special committee of Congress is investigating the crime. The Attorney General of the United States has publicly said he wants to talk to the man who sits in prison as the assassin. It was on April 4th, 1968 that Dr. King was...
Dean has left the building.